I'd like to
Confuse people.
I'd like to call the meeting to order for the Village of Essex Junction Planning Commission, May 6, 2021. This is a work session. So before we get started, there's a couple of things. First of all, Robin, do we have any additions or amendments to the agenda the way it stands as of now?
No.
Okay. Did any of you receive the minutes from April 1st, the meeting?
Yes.
Because I was on vacation. Either they came here or I can't locate them. But if everybody has them.
Dave, they're in the attachment with chapter 6 and 7.
I can't.
They're the third attachment.
Okay, let me see if I can find them. But we can move on while I'm looking for those.
Did anybody have any problems with them?
No, they look fine.
I was not at the April 1st meeting, so it's kind of a, you know, if you guys are fine with them, we can make a motion to accept them. John, did you have a chance to look at them? Phil?
I'm still looking for him. I was also, I did go out of town, but I'm not sure why I don't see those minutes right away.
They're in with the chapter 6 and 7 in that email.
I see Patrick is on too. Hey, Patrick.
Hey guys, sorry, I got my my son with me at the moment, so I'm kind of a little distracted, but he's
That's all right.
going to disappear in a few minutes.
Future Planning Commission member, that's excellent.
Yeah, right.
So do we want to tackle the minutes or do we need to look at them still?
I didn't see any issues with them either.
Yeah, I read through them. I didn't see any issues.
Okay. Do I hear a motion to accept the minutes from the regular meeting on April 1st, 2021?
So moved.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
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 All opposed? Okay, that takes care of that. So before we get into the work session, I see that there may be a guest on. I just want to make sure if anybody has anything that they want to talk about that's not on the agenda, now would be the time. Okay. Going once, going twice. Okay, I don't hear anything. So let's move on to the work session. Continued updates for the LDC and discussion on Design Five Corners and Design Review amendments. So who would like to start? Regina?
Sure. Okay, so there's a couple of different topics we're going to end up touching on tonight, but the majority of everything we're talking about is really associated with the design review overlay. Is everybody hearing that?
Yeah.
Yeah.
I don't know if that's me. I didn't do anything different.
What are you guys hearing?
It's like a flapping radio sound.
Your name, David, is all lit up on the participant list as if you're
That solved it by you muting. Hopefully you can unmute yourself at some point.
I'll tactfully interject when I have to, but I'll try to keep myself on mute, okay?
Okay. Okay, so it's all really around the design review in the village center and then also in the overlay area. So a few different things that we'll touch on within this are a little bit about the approval process. We talked about how it's a kind of confusing, and I can see that in the regs about whether you have to get a PUD or you don't have to get a PUD and when that comes into play. We will also touch on just some of the standards that are in the overlay, particularly buffers between single-family homes, multifamily homes within the village center district. Also talk about height. And then ultimately we'll talk about where geographically, I'll bring up a map, you want the overlay to where you want it to be. So I'll start off just by going through chapter 6 and kind of stopping on the comments that I brought up, and I can share my screen if that's the easiest way to do this. And then once I do this, you all just go like poof into no man's land. So just holler out if you have a question or you want to bring something.
Just make sure, if on my end, I'll be watching, just raise your hand if you want to comment so we don't get all confused, and I'll make sure I call you.
Dave, I wonder if you put your comments in the chat, that we might avoid the reverberation noise.
Yeah, I can try that.
All right, can folks see what I'm looking at, even though I'm on the wrong page?
Yeah.
I guess you don't know
Yeah, I
what
can
I'm
see
looking
your
at.
screen.
Okay. All right, hold on 1 second. I want to get up to the village center district first. Sorry about this scrolling. Okay. So this, my first comment here, this is just sort of a technical question. We don't need to go into a lot of detail about that, but I am, ultimately, I will need to know what this fragment of a sentence at the end of 2A is intending. But the real thing I want to talk about here is this concept about PUD or not PUD. And my biggest thing here is that I can see that this creates some confusion, particularly because 3A right here really more explains what I think should happen. If the development in the village center is going to create a subdivision, the subdivision process should be what you use as your approval process, and you do this design review as a component of that. If it's just a development that would be typical of a site plan review process, that's the review process you should use, and this design review should be a component of that. And that's really what section 3A describes. I'm not sure if you need this to be here and what that is intended to do. I guess my suggestion would be that you delete that, but maybe I'm missing something. And I could probably zoom in here if this is getting too hard to see. There you go. So 2B is what I'm questioning.
My first impression, Regina, is that I think we were trying to ensure that the trunk roads were, I guess, given some special treatment. And I think that's where we were trying to go with that.
Okay.
The guys might have a different perspective on that, but that was my initial thought.
Anyone else have any other thoughts on this one?
Yeah, I think when we had the initial conversation, it was, as Dan says, the problems in the trunk roads, I think especially Park and Pearl, because they seem to be the ones that are attracting retail commercial. And it would be, you know, any properties contiguous with the village right of way to the back of that property. So it wouldn't be a straight line, it would sort of go around the properties, the property boundaries.
And is the planned unit development review giving you a better process to review those developments as they come up for these existing residential structures?
I think one of the problems that I've seen is if it's a small lot, it's difficult to meet the requirements of the PUD in some respects. And they're also in conflict with the fact that you're allowed 100 lot coverage in the village center district. I mean, there's other ways to provide that. Those facilities can be inside the building, doesn't have to be outside the building. In terms of some of the recreational things, it could be a gymnasium, or it could be anything, it could be something on the roof. So John and I think, have both struggled a little bit with some of the requirements of the PUD, but John can chime in here, I'm sure. You're muted, John.
Yeah, I know. It is a little strange. We have in many of the other sections where PUDs are offered as an option for review. The way this is written, it appears to require that projects be reviewed as a PUD, and I'm not sure. I guess I'm not sure why we would really want to say that, unless we were trying to make people responsible for some criteria that are in that PUD section and not that aren't in the other option, which would be, review it as a standard project.
Mhm.
So I don't recall why that's in there. Don't have any issue with taking it out. I think, we're still back to the point of determining at the time that a project is submitted for review or during the review to determine whether or not this any project is a PUD and what are we getting for it? Why are we doing that? And I will say that because especially in the village center district, some of the lots are very strange. They're small, they're odd. The buildings are out of compliance with the current code in some cases. They're existing nonconformities. They're garages on somebody else's properties. There's all kinds of weird stuff that happens when you get into the older sections of town, and maybe not just specifically with the village center, but certainly the village center is part of this. So maybe we're trying to provide some flexibility, but I don't think it's lost if you allow people to submit as a PUD without requiring them to submit as a PUD. So I'm fine taking it out.
Okay. And I do think there is a section further down in the village district that does have that optional PUD.
Yeah, most of the places where we offer the choice, it's sometimes we'll say if there are more than so many buildings, you must submit as a PUD, but usually it's a choice, and that's where we keep coming back to. Well, if somebody chooses to submit as a PUD, it's because they're offering us something that's either not allowed or is in the normal approach, or they're showing us why their approach is better, and so they need that flexibility, and it's a trade-off.
Yeah.
Oh, you have your hand up?
Yeah, so I just wanted to point out that in this section 2B, it says are subject to provisions of section 724. I think it's actually 723 if I'm looking at it correctly.
Okay.
Probably just want to make note of that.
Yep. Okay. All right. That is helpful. So I will just make sure that the flexibility to apply for a PUD if you want to is still in here, but I will take out this requirement. Okay. Sorry, scrolling. Okay, so this standard gets at the height issue that was brought up a little bit at the last meeting. So currently in this district, there is a minimum of 2 stories, a maximum of 4 stories. This standard right here, this is 4, subpart 4, is attempting to keep some proportionality as some buildings come in and existing buildings that are shorter are adjacent to it, so that things don't get sort of crowded out. There's a lot of logic behind that, but for a place where you're really attempting for it to evolve to the sort of densest part and most vibrant part of your village, I don't know that this standard makes sense, and I'm wondering how folks feel about just clearly going straight to 4 stories.
Can you guys still hear that sound?
Yes.
Yeah.
We know you're about to speak. It comes first.
I'm gonna drop off a second and try to rejoin if that's okay. Go away.
Yeah, I have a bit of a problem with this because it ties us completely to decisions made in the past that we may not have been in favor of looking with our eyes. You know, if you guys read that book, The Past is a Foreign Country, but planning is about deciding for the future. You know, what are we doing that's going to benefit the people who haven't been born yet? Not are we tethered to decisions made in the past that we wouldn't make today if the same decision came before us?
Regina,
Yeah,
I think
it's a
we've
split.
outgrown. Robin, I think we've outgrown I agree with you. We've outgrown this. We've gotten beyond it. It's time to move on. And perhaps delete 4. I think the other requirements we have in there with the architectural elements and things reflecting, I think that's going to still reflect the aesthetics that we're looking for in the village center district. But I agree with you. It did have a purpose 10, 15, 20 years ago. It doesn't anymore. We've outgrown it, I think.
Okay. Anybody else? I can't see you, and I don't know if Dave had to jump off.
I'm back on. Can you guys hear
Okay.
everything?
Yeah, much
Dave,
better.
no buzz.
Better.
Yeah, I'd like to say, this is Phil, by the way. I'd like to say that, yeah, I think I'm in favor of, if we want to say 4 stories, we say 4 stories. I think that can probably lead to a little clearer language, especially for developers, that they know what they're working with when they see that language in the LDC. They know they can build a 4-story building.
Wasn't there something that the trustees put in place in terms of what that means? When
What the trustees did was they removed the option for someone to get a waiver to build 6 stories. They took that out last time around.
Yeah, the only place we have 6 stories in our code currently is in the industrial area.
Okay. That sounds good. So I will get that addressed. Let me scroll down here. We might be going to the overlay, but just checking. Okay. I'm going to scroll. I'm going to actually stop sharing because it's going to be really annoying until I get to my right page and then go back to sharing.
Well, Regina, the next piece you had was on page 79, dealing with parking.
Oh, yeah, I had some just commentary comments that I thought the parking was good as is, but let me go back up there.
Well, I wasn't sure if you were sarcastic or if you liked it.
Oh, no, I was honest.
Like I said, I wasn't quite sure, so I thought I'd ask.
Sorry. Any other comments that I put up there that anybody wants to talk about? I don't think I needed to talk about those. Okay. I'm going to share again. Okay, so this is really should look very familiar. It's based very much off of the exact design review overlay that you have in the Village Center district. You know, in terms of format, if these 2 sections really end up being exactly the same, it's possible that we don't have to repeat all the language down here. We could just sort of send somebody up to the other section. But I thought that it's important enough to really think about this and what it means in these other parts of town specifically, and then we can decide the most efficient way to put it in the code. So right now, sitting here down as its own section. In talking with Robin a little bit clearer, just in terms of where it makes sense to put this overlay district, we really thought about it on Pearl Street, all the way from the Village Center out to West Street Extension. And so that's just where it is right now, but we'll get to that in a little bit more detail later on about whether that's the right place or not. This second comment here, the purpose statement up in the Village Center designation talks about how it's important to think through the role of this area in the regional economy, and almost like that's the basis for why you're doing this level of regulation. It just seems sort of like an interesting reason. And I don't know if folks feel like when we expand out to these other places, if there's a different reason. To me, it's much more about the unique historic qualities of the existing buildings and the ability for new development to sort of work in with those. I don't know that it's as much about the role of the economy, but I don't know if folks have any opinion about that.
Well, Regina, I'll pitch in, and I was thinking that I agree with you up to Pearl Street, up to the West Street Extension. I would extend, if it doesn't already go, to 2 or 3 blocks on Maple Street from 5 Corners. I forget exactly what the name of the street is that's up there.
You mean Elm Street?
I think it's Elm Street. Is it Elm Street?
It's the first on the right that takes you down to Public Works.
Yes. Yeah. I was thinking all of Park Street, because the way it's developing at the moment, that we may as well just jump in and do all of Park Street all the way down to the bridge. I was thinking Lincoln to at least the intersection with North and Grove. Not including the St. James driveway. I wasn't quite sure about the commercial building that's in the corner there, is that how far to include that, but I figured I'd pitch that one in. And I was thinking that on Main Street, we should probably go to at least Pleasant Street. And I wasn't sure if we should include all the way down to the town office or not. But that could be the next jump. But I'll leave my thoughts on the table here for you guys to.
I agree
Yeah, I
with
like that
Diane.
idea. I'd go all the way to 81 Main Street.
Okay.
Okay, so
And
let me
it
get
may,
this.
you know, we may end up saying it's a little bit of a watered down version of what we do in the village center, but you know, we got to control the stuff that's being built along those prime entry points to the village, because they are becoming increasingly important, and the things that go up that aren't quite up to caliber are going to start to stand out. We don't, why do we need that? You know, why
And I
can't we
also think
have something to
maybe
say?
maybe we could, Regina, that sentence, the way that reads, and your comments about the economy being, you know, one of the reasons, maybe the historical aspect and the economical aspect are both important. I mean, if the character of the village is not where people want to do business, then it could have an effect, you know. So I think they're both important points. I just think it's poorly worded.
Okay, yep, that makes sense.
I just wanted to ask a quick question. I agree with extending of the boundaries, but I was just thinking with the potential idea of Main Street right at Five Corners being eventually blocked off, and the new connector road coming in, how that might change traffic patterns, and if any of this is going to incorporate some of that potential change in traffic patterns.
So
I mean,
those
I
were,
think that there's still going to be the main corridors, but just thinking of some of those, you know, making sure that if some of those smaller side streets or whatever start to become more cut throughs, do we want to do we want to potentially also maybe have some control over what potentially gets put in around there? I don't necessarily know what those new traffic patterns might be, but I just wanted to throw that out as a thought.
Railroad Street's already part of the village center district.
Right.
In fact, the side streets, with the exception of Railroad Street, will see less traffic once the connector road goes in if Main Street's closed, because you know it'll take less time to stay on the trunk roads to get through the village center than it will to go around the side streets. And the idea of the side streets is to save time, not to add time.
Yeah, no, I know. I mean, I'm just trying to think of, you know, because a lot of people come through and turn up Main Street to go that way. You know, now are they going to turn up Lincoln? I guess they'll go straight through and pick up the connector road and take a left on the connector through Railroad Street to get around.
If they're in a hurry, if they're in no hurry, they'll take Lincoln, I'm sure.
Okay, and then yes.
if we Patrick, if we extend those boundaries, like we're talking about, as those projects come up, which we know they will eventually, then the impacts to the traffic and studies will be completed as part of the, you know, as part of the review process for the projects. So that's a good point you bring up.
Yeah, I mean, it sounds like they're being addressed the way Diane kind of put them out in terms of, you know, going out to North and Grove or whatever that was, up Lincoln Street and going out to 81 Main. But I just wanted to kind of put that thought out there that was running through my mind.
And where were you saying on Maple? How far up?
Elm Street.
Oh.
It jumps up one more block.
Oh, gotcha.
I'm trying to remember all the things. There's a bunch of commercial buildings that are there now, or they're converted homes. And I think that area ends at Elm. There used to be a dentist across, I think it's across the street from Elm, but I don't think it goes much farther.
Would you, why wouldn't you go all the way out to Maple Street Park? Just because they're all pretty much isolated homes built there already?
I think it has more of a residential feel than, because the section I'm talking about is more of a residential office district. And I think the residential office district goes to Elm, or no, it doesn't. It's one street, one property short of Elm.
Yeah, Diane, I think you're right.
Yeah, and that one property short of Elm is the Village Center District.
Yeah. Okay.
Right. Well, I'm saying extend it all the way to Elm. I believe that we had a proposal way back when from a doctor who lived on Elm and Maple and had a carriage house that he wanted to convert into his office. And we said no, because it was outside the residential office area. And to be perfectly honest, as I drive by, I'm kind of going, you know what? We're developing everywhere. We are moving and expanding due to the economics. Nowadays, I don't think we would say no. I think we would probably say yes. So I guess I'm saying let's open it up to, yeah, it's on the corner of Elm and Maple.
But I mean, if that's the case, correct me if I'm wrong, I should know because I live down here, but East Street, on the corner of East Street and Maple, there's businesses. Am I wrong about that?
There were between East Street and Railroad Street, there's a bunch of them in there.
Yeah, there's a
Apple Valley Vision.
Yep.
There's yeah.
Well, let's go to East Street.
I mean, I think you're right, Diane, about the residential character, and that's kind of that East Street corner, I think, is where those businesses kind of end.
Okay.
You know what I mean?
I'm amenable to East Street.
What do you guys think?
I don't know. I kind of feel like we're thinking about extending it basically to the entrances on all sides, except for this side. And I guess I don't know what the downside would be to extending it to Maple Street Park. Like, is there I mean, I agree, it does seem more residential, but what's the downside of doing that?
It definitely adds a layer of historic preservation that is not necessarily required for a lot more homes.
Okay.
Not saying that's pro or con, just is.
Yeah.
I think a lot of the homes, as I'm thinking of my travels up and down Maple, there were a lot of historic homes. They have been altered and chopped up. That I don't think they would meet the historic piece anymore, other than the history that they have. But as a representative sample of something historic, it's intrinsic and not aesthetic. Because there's been a lot of renovations along, especially the place that's the apartment that are next to the park. He's I'm not sure if he's done with the siding project or not, but he was, last I was up that way, he was still re-siding.
So what are we really saying if we try to extend it, that we want to see all the project, is this enough of an issue that we want to see every homeowner's idea for what they're going to do to their house with the siding from here on out? Or are we really trying to control new building? Like if you're going to tear something down and build something new, we should be able to have more say than we do now. If you're painting your front door, do I care that you change the color? I'm I want us to understand what we're doing here before we go.
I think it's new buildings, Sean. I mean, at the moment in the village, not the town, but in the village, if your siding's rotten and you're replacing it, we consider it maintenance and repair. You're keeping your property in good shape. It makes the neighborhood look good. So we let people, go ahead with that. But certainly new buildings, yeah.
John, I don't, okay, my gut feel is that what we've seen so far, we haven't seen the consolidation of 2 lots to expand something to, we haven't seen any lots get chopped up, okay, in this neck of the woods. Even though as I'm looking at this picture, there are some that could, they're just configured weird to be able to do that. It's like a very fat spaghetti list, but it doesn't really lend itself unless somebody starts putting lots together. And I don't see that people have been doing that. More of the commercial chopping up and putting things together has been on some of the other streets, not this one. And I'm kind of going, do I want to encourage that chopping up, or do I want to encourage residential in this area that seems to be residential? And I guess my question would be is how many accessory apartments have gone into this area, because this area would allow those. Well, has there been more infill? I'm
only saying what I'm saying because if we're talking about this design review chapter that we have in the village center as the basis for an overlay, it says that design review is required by the planning commission for any proposed construction, reconstruction, demolition, or exterior alteration, including a change of color. So if you actually go that far with the new chapter, you're gonna see a lot of people, right, coming in for changes of color, or I want to take my shutters off, or I have to re-roof and I want to use a different material. You're going to get all of that, and I don't know that that's our intent. It seems excessive if we're generally pretty comfortable with what happens in a neighborhood that's relatively established. So maybe the trick is to rewrite this design review piece so that it's not so invasive, and that it sets the rules for what we want to see and why. And it's not everything.
Yeah, we don't want to discourage people from taking care of their properties, basically. If it becomes
maintenance and repair is allowed, but it's like if you're in Sturbridge Village, you can only use 5 colors and that's it.
Right.
And so you have to be careful with this stuff, because when you write it in there and all of a sudden you get you get maybe more than you bargained for. So I think I would suggest that we help Regina try to figure out how to tailor the language in this so that when we extend the districts, it's not everything.
Can we say that any proposed project that the code requires approval by the planning commission and/or the zoning board?
I'm not sure I want to solve it tonight. I'm thinking that we should give direction on what we're trying to achieve, and then we can wordsmith the thing, not at the meeting.
Okay.
Yeah.
So
Is
what
there
are we trying?
a maintenance clause or something that you could just put in?
Well, there's a maintenance clause built into the base piece already, and it's pretty standard in any anything that even the historic preservation sections all have. Basically you're allowed to repair and maintain things with no questions. We're not trying to prevent that, but if you change the material, like if you, for example, you took all your trim boards off because you're tired of this, the 5th time you've replaced them because they keep rotting, and you put Boral or AZAC or PVC up instead because it's not going to rot, that's not legal. You can't actually do that under repair and maintenance. You have to use the same material. So we want to go through this and really try and explain what we mean to regulate and don't touch the rest of it. And I think the burden is higher the way it's written now because it's supposed to apply to our historic downtown properties.
Yeah.
And so we put in a lot more things the last time we wrote this, including the section on historic preservation and the Secretary of Interior standards and all that. That's not really what we're after for some of these.
Right.
Even if it's a gateway street and it's a main spur, I don't know that we're really trying to say all of that. So
Yeah.
we've got a little work. I would say we want to soften what the overlay district means, and maybe it doesn't apply to a lot of things, as change of color and stuff, but it should apply if somebody does a major, proposes something major. We'd rather have the ability to, you're going to build a whole new front porch on your house. We want to see what that looks like,
Well, I guess that kind of brings up, John, you've been to the town planning commission more often than I have. And I know that they review one heck of a lot more stuff than we do. A lot of it seems to be in their consent agenda as opposed to a thorough walkthrough sort of a thing. So I guess my question ends up being, is you seen more of that? How would you reflect what they do into what we're talking about?
Yeah, they seem to care to see a lot more, but they may not necessarily have the the regulations in place to do anything other than make you comply with the the town standards for how steep is your driveway, or how did you handle something. I don't think they have the review authority that we've written into our village center.
Yeah, and part of it for them, John, is about fees.
Yeah, they
fees
seem
for things we do not collect fees for, and they review things for the purpose of collecting fees.
Well, they track a lot of stuff. Yes.
Yeah. I'm pretty amazed at how little it costs to permit a project in the village. I gotta say, it's I'm not sure that our fees are really where they should be, but that's a whole nother discussion.
Yeah, they're not, John. You're right.
So I guess I would think that we want to give Regina some direction on what we're trying to do here, and I think it's not as much as we're doing in the village center, but we want to have some expanded ability to see what these larger projects might be. Maybe it's just new construction, which would include additions, and maybe it's not color, but maybe in some cases it might be color, but I don't know what those are yet.
Well, what about the size, the size of the project as well? I mean, let's talk about an example. There's an apartment complex right next to Maple Street Park. So, it's kind of old. It's a larger lot. What happens if they decide to do a project? I mean, I guess that's the question we're trying to answer, is what are we trying to encourage and what are we trying to discourage?
I mean, to dovetail on that, what if they wanted to do an autumn pond, there on that lot?
Yeah. Yep.
Well,
we'd want to see what that looks like so we could kind of have some. I mean, I don't know that we had design control over Autumn Pond, but that they did such a beautiful job in there. That's a very conscientious developer, and the projects, I would like to look at that wherever they put it, and unfortunately, nobody really gets to see it. It's tucked way back in the woods. But what we're saying is these major arteries coming into our and going through our village deserve a little more attention so that they don't just look like a hodgepodge of whoever felt like doing what they wanted to do there. We want to, make sure that they're up to some, some overall standard.
But we also don't want to make the language so vague that everybody's confused, right?
Right.
So,
that's why we have experts.
like Regina.
Yeah.
Yeah, I can narrow it down if you got some ideas.
I mean, the verbiage is in our LDC already. It's just in different places, and so our task is to sort through it and figure out how, what level of review authority are we trying to settle on for these spurs, and why, and when does it ratchet up because it's getting more important and getting closer to 5 corners or something. And there may be special districts that don't need anything because they're already pretty obvious, and there may be districts where we're thinking though stuff is happening and it may not really be that cohesive, so we want to try and improve that. And that's the task. I mean, are we happy with what we see when we see improvements that we're driving by every day? And if we have a way to make them better, great. And if we end up, not being able to get there, then we'll keep trying.
Almost like I'm thinking almost some sort of like a graduated, I don't know if that's the right word, set of requirements the further you get from the center village district.
Yeah, but the
That's kind of what
comment
you're
that,
talking about,
if
John.
you look at the beginning of your entry into the village, where you start to recognize you're there, we talked about having gateways, we talked about having, sometimes it's a sign, sometimes it's a physical object, like a pillars or some, how do you know when, with the street lights show up, okay, I'm somewhere, the decorative ones, I've gotten here, right? So, we should understand, is it where the speed limit changes down to 25? Is it where, you've got kind of ADL and Maple Street Park that are on opposite sides of the street that are pretty, typical entry signals that maybe you say, okay, well, after those things, when I'm slowed down, I noticed all the flashing lights because I went through the school zone or whatever it was, but you're now going slow enough that you're paying attention to the street life that's on both sides, and it is very residential in there, but it doesn't take too many funny looking projects to change that character in a negative way. And I hopefully whatever they're doing on the siding for that project by Maple Street Park, I don't know if they needed any permits for that, but we're happy that they're trying to fix it up, but I'd love to know what it looks like.
Yeah, definitely something to think about.
So what would be most helpful? Looking at the language or looking at the map and deciding on the areas that we're talking about, or it might be too hard to do that. It might be more of a pinging back and forth.
To me, it seems like the major arteries coming into town are easy to define in terms of businesses, except for Maple Street. If
Okay.
you know Essex Junction, Maple Street is the only one that's kind of it's residential, but you've got a couple doctor's offices, and it kind of all of a sudden you're at 5 corners. So if there's a challenge anywhere with the major arteries, it's that street, that artery, I believe. I don't know if you guys agree or not.
Yeah, I think we have to come up with a few triggers. If you're doing A, B, C, or D, then yes, it needs review.
Yeah.
If you're replacing countertop or changing a broken window or, painting your door red when it was green, not sure that needs a review.
Right.
Yeah,
Robin,
and
you're on the right track.
Yeah, and the other arteries, we already know they've already undergone some of those changes that we need to monitor, if you will, to make sure that when they do come up, that we're able to get our to look at them, to look at the projects.
Yeah, I
Okay,
think,
so-
sorry, this is Phil. Yeah, I think, John, I think you nailed it with like that feeling of when you get into the village center. And I think Maple Street Park, like at least for me, is like, that's when I feel like I've gotten into the center,
Me
Maple
too.
Street Park and the school.
Yeah.
And I think the same on Main, like 81 Main Street, it feels like you're getting into the center, and all the other places we talked about with extending this, this overlay feel like that's when you've gotten into the village center. So I would be in favor of extending to Maple Street Park with like everything that we're talking about, making sure that we see what we want to see and not see what we don't care about.
So Regina and Robin, and for the rest of us, if you take the map and you maybe figure out where that split is on each of the 5 arteries coming in, I think that's enough for the map, and then we just talk about what the triggers are and what they're not, and I think that would be good. I can't see having all the stuff in here that we have for our village center needing to be in there, but certainly some of it. So that's where I would go with it, and then we can take a look at that, next time or whenever it's ready, and see what we think of it.
Yep. Agreed.
Agreed.
Okay, so I do have some specific comments in the rest of this chapter 6 that might be helpful to talk through now.
Okay.
Let's just go for it, but if it's feeling like it's not actually helpful at the moment, then we can.
Nope. Let's go for it.
From background. Okay. So we talked about those. Yep, this is the same PUD thing that we talked about before, so we would just transfer that in down to the rest of this. That's kind of just a technical comment. What else is in here? I hate the way New Word does these comments. I can't see what I'm looking for.
So you're up to the village center. Did we have other districts that we wanted to tweak? Like I'm still in section 608, the transit oriented district. We keep, I'm not sure that's still working for us or getting us what we want. Robin and I talk about this sometimes, and I'm not sure we're still I think we're still on opposite sides of the fence on it, but I don't know that we need to talk about it tonight. I just wanted to point out that somewhere in there, we still have some work to do to figure out that section is doing what we want. Hasn't resulted in any real projects that have, except for the one that I don't know if it's finished or half finished or what, but it's supposed to be a restaurant attached to a hotel, and now it's a smoke shop or something. I mean, I don't even get what's going on there. It's more a couple of times from what got approved, and in my opinion, it's less than what we expected.
Yeah, a lot less.
And so those are the kind of things that you wish you had control of, but somehow you don't, even though you did.
Well, in that district, we have control over metrics, square footage, height. We have no design review.
So in keeping with 608, and we asked Regina to contemplate having design review or our design review part 2 go that way.
Yeah.
We have a section it's a page 84 if you've got the book. It's B2. It says the standards when the TOD district in some cases conflict with other standards. Blah, 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 blah. Essentially, it says that the standards in 608 would override And in this case, we'd have to change that. You know, if we put design review into the transit district, because essentially it would nullify any design review standards that we imposed, having that wording there. I agree. I don't know that the transit oriented district really is doing what we thought it would do. And the district designation precedes me being on the planning commission, so I don't know why it was done, other than the fact that Pearl Street is a major corridor, period. And it was a reaction to that. I reviewed 608 before our meeting today, and it talks about short streets and connected pieces, and none of the developments that are there right now connect to anything. There is no alleyway off of Pearl Street, even though potentially it could have one, actually quite a few along there. But it would have to be something we would encourage. I don't think anyone developing anything would automatically jump to that, because they would say, there's another road I got to build. So I guess that's something, you know, opening that can of worms in 608 and the transit oriented. That would be one thing I think we need to look at.
Yeah, I think those roads that we're talking about down, more than anything else, was for that development parcel. Was there be roads inside that development parcel, as opposed to connections, because you're certainly not going to get a new road across the rail line.
No. It also talks about development being over 5 acres. Yeah, if you start putting some of those lots together, so there's some very long lots that go down to the railroad. You could probably get 5 acres pretty quick. There's somebody that parks cars, and I'm not sure how many they get in there, next to the Good Stuff building. So, you know, they might be able to get, you know, 5 acres connected up there. So yeah,
it seemed, I like, I mean, it's written in a way that sounds attractive, and it sounds like we're trying to encourage some very specific things to happen. And so far it hasn't happened. And we actually, the one project that did appear to be delivering what we were hoping to get has stalled. And so now we have the front half of it as a different use. The building, I think, as Robin points out, it meets the letter of the metrics in terms of layout, but it still feels kind of flimsy and you know, less inviting than I was expecting. And I don't know if maybe there's landscaping's not finished or colors aren't painted, or I don't know what's happening, but it looks like it's open.
They're going to go to temporary CO, John.
Yeah.
the moving trucks are moving stuff in every day. That's the stage you're in right now.
So is there more happening? Do we get street trees or then, you know, what's the pedestrian benefit there?
Yeah, they haven't done their landscaping yet, and
Okay.
other things. That's why they go to temporary CO.
All right.
So
Well,
can I just ask if you had the design overlay in this area when you were reviewing that, do you think it would have given you the tools that you're looking for? Or do
Yes.
you more think like a fundamental change needs to happen in the underlying TOD?
I think the design review would help a lot, but there's actually quite a bit in here that's written in a way that tries to direct the design in more than other development you know, districts that we have. I mean, it actually comes right out and tells you a lot, but it didn't result in a quality building, I guess, is my issue. You know, it got modified for a number of reasons on its way through execution, and it's not what it was supposed to be. So I want us to keep thinking about that whole district. And if it's not delivering what we hope, then we should be trying to change it. And maybe the design, maybe we just got to get a little tougher on the design overlay part and really stick to some guns. We've had other projects where we had design control and they got constructed differently and they're still open. So some of it is the wording is there, the intent is there for us to be able to improve these buildings, and yet it's still not happening. So I'm hoping to get better at follow through, I guess.
Okay, well, certainly in terms of kind of order of operations of once we define where the overlay is going to go, get relative level of comfort on what the standard is going to be on the expanded overlay, then we do have to go through an exercise of making sure that it works with what's underlying and make sure there's no conflicts. And we can certainly add that level of thought too, in terms of whether with the overlay now on top of the TOD, is it going to get you to where you think you want to be, or should we do some tweaking to the underlying district as well?
Okay. Where to next?
I was just going to go down to the new overlay language unless anybody else wants to talk about any of the other districts along the way.
No.
Okay. Okay, let me share my screen again here. Okay, so now we're in the design standards a little bit, and partially this is why in the email that I sent, you got some of the overlay, the underlying zoning district standards just sort of pulled out easily for you. But number 3 here, especially, this says basically in the village center district, what you're aiming for is basically a no setback. You want to pull the buildings as close as you can to the street. In these other outlying areas, are you generally comfortable with the setback as it exists, sort of on the ground, and what the zoning districts are called for, or do you want to be adjusting that? I'm assuming you want to kind of stick with what you have. And not
Yes.
go quite as tight to the streets as we would in the village center district.
Yeah. As a matter of fact, we had discussed before gradually setting them back as you exited the center to give that feeling. Robin, I remember you talking about this with one of the projects.
We've got your noise again, Dave.
There you go.
This is reminding me what my biggest problem is with this new word commenting is you have to hit send or it doesn't accept it and it sends you all around the document and it makes me crazy. Okay, so we're going to roughly.
Well, Regina, before you leave this page, the IV here was section we already tailored in earlier this meeting about the 10% average height. Maybe we want to get rid of that here, unless it still applies.
That's going to be my second question. So in addition to the setbacks that exist in these underlying districts, I assume you also want to keep the height associated with the underlying districts. Does that question make sense?
It makes perfect sense. My opinion is that we stay with the heights that are in the current districts and not, I don't think we're going to see the 10% because I think we max out at 3 stories.
Yeah, except the TOD also is 4 stories.
Yep,
And
except for the
highway
COD.
arterial.
Right.
So yeah, I think that would make sense that we would take out this 10% as well. All right, let me see if I have any other questions in here. Okay, so this is kind of a big one, and this actually might depend on which trunk route we're talking about. So in the village center district, you have the formula-based retail and restaurants section in the design review part. Do we think we want to keep this? I don't have a great sense of how many businesses in the TOD district, Pearl Street, would become non-conforming.
They're all non-conforming.
They'd all be on
Yeah.
non-conforming.
So what are thoughts generally? Would we just simply not apply this into the TOD, or would we say only for new development that happens in the TOD, these standards would come into play?
I think it's for new. I mean, that's one of the issues I've had with that district, which is that there are so many exceptions to what we've asked for, and the idea is that we asked for where we want to be, not where we are now. So when we have a chance to have a say in what's happening, then I think we're going to hold them to the new standards. But other than that, I don't know that we can.
Yeah, I think, I mean, basic tenet in the code at the minute is if you have a non-conforming use, you can't make it any more non-conforming.
Yeah.
If you're in violation, you can't apply for a permit unless the proposal cures the violation. So.
Okay. And then what about for the other trunk routes? Do we want this in those districts? I assume yes. Main Street, Maple Street, Lincoln Street, Park.
Yes, from me.
Yeah, same here.
Yeah.
I guess my question would be is that there's a, how would this affect the Chinese food place that's on Main Street near Martone's? I mean, he's in the building, but the only thing that would be different is that his sign is different from anybody else's. I would assume that this applies to signs too.
Well, it wouldn't affect him. Wouldn't affect him because he's pre-existing. If he came in for a change, then he would be.
Okay.
Yeah, and I'm not sure. I'll double check and look at the definition of formula-based. Formula-based means to me a chain.
Yeah.
Well, he's not a chain.
That's what it does mean, a chain.
Yeah.
You know, a McDonald's or whatever, you know, corporation.
Right. And typically what this section is doing is basically saying, even if you are a chain, you have to look more like what our village looks like than what you would typically look like. So it's not preventing any of those from coming in, but it would just make them, you know, build their building or put their restaurant in an existing building that's much more in line with the character. In other areas. Okay. All right, so those are the only specific questions I had in here. As you folks sort of think through this section is very easily written as historic preservation and design review. And so it's not too difficult to think in some areas the historic preservation part will hold, and in other places it maybe is not as necessary. We can also do it definitely as you folks have described it, where at a certain point in development, these things would, standards would kick in. So yeah, we'll think through that. But if I could get Diane to tell me her distances one more time, that would be helpful to me.
Okay.
I have Main Street, I have Lincoln Street, and I have Maple, but I just missed Park Street.
Park Street would be to Cascade.
Cascade, okay. All right. That is helpful. Let me look at my list here. Okay. The other thing that I think, Diane, you brought this up at the last meeting. I just wanted to talk through this a little bit. You said it would be helpful if there's a way to incentivize, I think this is what you said, the older homes to go into more multifamily residential. Is that what you said?
Well, there are a lot of homes that are being converted, like a lot of the Victorians, if they haven't converted already, have the potential to do that. There are also some that aren't Victorians. They're just larger homes, and I don't know the style. Maybe Robin knows the name of the styles that are there that have the potential to break up. Right now, they're not. For I guess whatever reasons the owners have, or they've broken them up and we don't know.
Yeah.
Sort of thing.
Yeah, I think. Yeah, I think it's an important point, sorry, Dan, that you make, because, the houses that we're talking about are anachronistic to what today's families are looking for. And if we don't permit some flexibility, then we're blighting those properties, and we're going to start to see some of them go into disrepair. Whereas it could be as simple as, an accessory apartment, which is easy to do, that's administratively approved, or one or two more apartments in it. If the land holds it, if they can accommodate the cars and so on with the usual metrics, I think it's important that we let people know there's an opportunity to do that. There was a building on Pearl Street, same side of the street, not too far from the fire station, that struggled for a long time. And the owner wanted to sell it, and they couldn't really get out from under it. And it's a problem, How can we help them? How can we give an opportunity, which is also bringing, apartments into the village. Patrick's talked a bit about, the mix. All these new buildings are 1 unit, 2 unit, or 1 person, 2 person. But at the moment, I haven't done a survey, but I would say, I'm going to guess, at least 70% of the residential buildings in the village are 3 or 4 bedroom homes. The mix might have changed a bit. I think probably 12 years ago, there'd been more 3-4 family homes. The number of properties has increased, but certainly there's begin to be a bit more equilibrium. But a lot of the properties are 3-4 bedrooms. Most of the efficiencies 1 bedroom, 2 bedrooms. they're in new apartment buildings. Maybe there's an opportunity to have a former 6-bedroom house be 2 3-bedroom apartments on a single family lot that gives people a garden, not just, you know, a space to live in. And I think there's an opportunity there that we haven't really looked at closely at before.
I think there's actually I think in some of the places that I've read, it does talk about that if you convert a home, that it should still continue to look like a home, as opposed to an apartment building, which actually right now I'm on the page dealing with accessory apartments, and it talks about, you know, converting things. You're right, Robin. We need to have the ability to continue to have these older buildings continue to function, to continue to have that aesthetics that we're looking for. But it does need to have, if you know, if there's cars and things, they need to be appropriately not parked in the front yard. You know, they need to comply with some of the coding that we've got written. And yes, I'm all for people having gardens and things and having that space, which I think quite a few of the places that I know about still allow that sort of thing. There's my neighbor is renovating a house, and his nephew is a real estate agent who told me that he was bidding on a 1-acre property that would be in the village center district, and how he regretted not being able to get that. So I actually looked to see, you know, where that lot was, and I went, wow, I hadn't realized there was a 1-acre lot there with a house on it, but lo and behold. So do I foresee, now that he told me about that there's probably going to get a subdivision going on? Yeah, I anticipate that. Robin's probably going to do something administratively, you know, in the future. Once
not for subdivision, Dan, it'd be all you guys, but yeah.
Right. Well, it depends on, I think well, anyhow. So however it works out, you know, I anticipate that infill is going to happen. But, you know, will the home that's currently there be there? I don't know. It might be. Or it might be, what was that development that was off of Maple Street, that they tucked some townhouses behind. And I don't think there was anything on there, but they managed to tuck like 3 or 4 townhouses, you know, off of the road. So I mean, it was done nicely, but we looked at it and they had to present to us because it was a subdivision. So I don't know that Victorian being broken up would come in to do that. Am I wrong?
Well, I was asking because, you know, in terms of if the market is there to convert homes, the market is there, the incentive is there from that side of things. What might be challenging is at least for the homes in the village with the historic preservation and design overview, is that you do have to keep it looking like it does now as an existing home. But I don't know that you would want to change that. So that was just my question. Like, I'm assuming you don't want to go so far where you're losing the character of these homes. You just want to know if there's anything we can do as an incentive-based approach to provide some flexibility for these houses.
Yeah, I think the incentive is they keep the character of the house.
Well, that might be, I don't know how that's an incentive.
Well, maybe they get an extra unit if From the outside, the building looks just the same or something. I don't know.
Oh, I see what you're saying.
Sorry, I got to take a call here. Back in a second.
Right,
Okay.
so as to say that as long as the exterior and the viewscape of it, streetscape, remains intact, we could allow for a second or third interior apartment to be constructed. But if there's any sort of renovation or rehab to the building that impacts the exterior, that we're probably going to want to take a look at it, and then to ensure that it maintains that historic nature of the village, that feel of the village that you get when you go through the streets. It's
Yeah.
Is that kind of the sense I'm getting?
Yeah.
We had a project like that came up. You guys probably remember the I can't remember the address, but it was on Pearl, where he did some work on the siding and the windows, and there was already apartments in that building. So, you know, and the process was pretty painless. I think everybody knew what was going on, and I think it worked well. So if you were going to go even further and say, well, I'm going to take another building and, you know, keep the character, but turn it into apartments, I think that's perfectly acceptable. I think that's something we want to see.
Yeah, without Robin Beaner, do any of us know what I think ADUs, right? They just allow for one additional unit within the property. But if somebody came forward with a large Victorian, they might want to do 2 ADUs, if you will, interior, without doing that, you know, building like a carriage house off the back. Like an ADU can still be part of the existing building. So maybe that's what that incentive could be, that we could allow for that, you know, 2 apartments, you know, a single family home, large Victorian, be split into 3 apartments as opposed to 2 apartments, to create that additional flexibility to create more housing.
Or for that matter, you know, and with some of these Victorians, if they actually build a carrot house and it ends up being 2 apartments, because I know that right now, I thought there was a rule or a bill before this, the legislator, about having, and Virginia, you might know better than I thought it was going to allow to have the owner of the property be in the ADU and have the house either divided or rented to the renter.
Yeah, so right now, I mean, my read of current statute is that you certainly, as a municipality, could already do this, but now you have to do it. So that's on our list when we get to the house, when we get to the state statute changes list, this will come up.
Okay.
That now with accessory dwelling units, you have to write your code that the owner of the property can live in either the primary structure or the accessory dwelling unit. And then I would say statute allows you to go beyond that. So you could say it doesn't need to be owner occupied at all. If you want.
There's I don't know how many of you have been to all the housing conferences or heard all the scuttlebutt, but these are exactly the questions that help make communities more flexible and therefore allow more housing options, which tends to be what we're all trying to do right now. You know, if I've got a garage and it doesn't look any different, but all of a sudden it's an accessory apartment, you know, what do we really care? You know, like, why are we making restrictions that aren't really substantive in a visual way, you know? Or, you know, what do we care if there's 3 apartments in a big Victorian instead of 2? You know, like that shouldn't really, you know, if somebody has to chop a whole new door in somewhere and it took out a window, you know, maybe we care. But you know, we need to really be as flexible as we can in allowing these sort of uncommon dwelling situations to evolve, if they can evolve naturally and organically without a big deal. That is really the secret to what these accessory apartments are all about. It's not trying to rebuild the whole existing dwelling. It's trying to work with each one's unique, and you try and work with it, and you try and make somebody have an ability to have an apartment in there. Mm-hmm. And I think our rules should be as flexible as we can make them. The one question that usually comes up that's kind of a sticking point for many people, though, is the owner occupancy. And that's I expect us to have a fairly robust discussion on that, because that's a tricky one. It's a slippery slope once people don't live there, but it happens. So
yes, Phil.
Yeah, I think something we could do. I mentioned it before. I'm in favor of the AUDs and providing lots of flexibility for our residents to change their properties to provide more housing. Obviously, we have a housing shortage, and it provides income for people. I think something we could consider as far as owner occupied goes is, I don't know the specifics it would be, but not allowing like a business operation of these houses. So the business doesn't own all of these properties, but they are like individually owned, even if the owner does not live at the actual property. So we could set like a number of property, a limit or something like that somehow, so we're not dealing with a mega property corporation, and keep it that small town to the actual individual owners.
Yeah, I'm not sure you're enabled to do that kind of thing in zoning. It is possible to think maybe from an ordinance perspective, but I'm not sure about that. Some of this comes into play when you're trying to think about regulating or putting some handholds on short-term rentals. So Airbnb, VRBO, that kind of thing, which also is kind of a non-zoning thing. It's in a different ordinance category. But in terms of they're still full-time rental units, and controlling ownership over those, that's a tricky one. I have to think about that.
Yeah, I don't know if it goes back to like commercial versus something else. There's obviously commercial residential properties, and then these owner occupied or individually owned. I don't know how. I own a duplex in Burlington, and I still don't understand how the state designates between businesses like that and me, who owns one duplex.
Yeah. Yeah, they just want to be able to tax you more, so that's why they care.
But I think the community, one of the questions that I get hammered with my husband, who says, so how does it affect the community when you don't have owner occupied buildings? If you suddenly creep up to 50% rental, 50% ownership, or 40% owner, 60% rental, how does that change the community dynamics? And that's something we have, I guess you talk about that in when you talk about your comprehensive plan, and not necessarily your land development code. But at this point, we're in between here. It's kind of like that topic. And how do we get that reflective in, how do we talk about community dynamics without, we're talking about legislating community dynamics is what we're talking about. So it's, how how has it changed? You know, I don't even know what our percentage is at the moment.
I would guess it's more owner occupied than it used to be, if anything. I will say that people stayed with me last summer. They were in their mid-50s. Neither of them had ever owned a house, and they'd always rented. And I liked it that way. And they'd been living in Brooklyn, but they moved up here during, the worst of the pandemic, and they actually ended up buying a house in Charlotte. But I was amazed they were in their mid-50s. They'd never owned a house. But a lot of people, some people can't get to the. It's not so much they can't afford a mortgage; they can't get to the point where they can make the down payment. For a lot of people, and there are people who don't want to buy.
I think it's more common in urban areas. I know when I lived in Seattle, it wasn't that uncommon for people to not really want to buy. What would be the purpose of buying? I think when I moved to Vermont, it was definitely people were like, oh, well, why would you not ever buy a house? It seemed flipped.
Yeah.
Well, the economic advantages of owning a home versus renting is evident. It's sort of like, why are you paying somebody else's mortgage for them? But it's as more people are retiring, they're moving out of their starter home, but they still own it and they rent it. Sort of a thing. It's or they're splitting their home up. Okay, so then you have that added ADU or split home or whatever. It does. We've never really discussed that. What community dynamics are we talking about when we're planning things? What is it that we're? Yes, I know we're under the big push to try to get everybody in some kind of housing unit. It seems to be good stewards to get everybody housed. But on the other hand, how is it affect? Yeah, the pandemic. Yes, Robin, you're right. People are moving here. Good gosh, they're buying houses only seeing them through the internet, and then they show up. And then the question ends up being, in conversations is, well, once the pandemic is gone, will the housing free up a bit because people go back to where they used to live? Or I keep viewing it as that they'll love us and they'll stay. They'll get accustomed to being here and they'll just stay because they like it. So I don't know that we can legislate that, though. I really don't know that we have that capability, other than to try to get our regulations as flexible as possible to allow housing to occur without impacting the quality of life any more than it does.
Yeah, I think you're right, Dan. Not only do I think we shouldn't do it. Never mind, how could we do it? When you try to do stuff like that, it ends up having a lot of unintended consequences that you couldn't anticipate at the time.
Okay, so where are we headed for with this? Do we have more to go over?
I don't have more to go over. I can certainly, at the next meeting, have recommendations, suggestions for each of the trunk routes, how much of the overlay will come into play there, and maybe for various reasons. But if folks, over the next couple of weeks, if you have ideas, please just email me and let me know what you're thinking and what level of review for what type of development makes sense on each of those 5 trunk areas.
Yeah, and I think the thing that we should all be thinking about, because I think it is a big change, right? And it's been brought up that we don't, we don't want to make things too restrictive, but we do want to have some say in, what our village looks like. So always be thinking about the potential consequences as well as what you're trying to encourage.
Yeah, David, I think, flexibility is the key, but also I like the term may when it refers to us. We may. And if somebody comes up with a project that, John and I like to say that blows our socks off, we may say, this is fantastic. Yes, please.
Yeah, I think
Before we end, I would like everybody to put it in the diary that tonight Diane Clements said, I agree, Robin, 3 times, which is maybe 3 times more she said it in the 12 years since we've been working together.
Don't get
she
used
must
to
be
it.
tired.
No, I won't.
So
Obviously, I feel a lot smarter working with that.
are we going to warn when are we going to meet again, and what are we going to be going over? Obviously, we'll be going over what Regina is working on for us.
How are we doing versus the nice list of topics that Diane put together for us at the beginning of this effort? And does anybody have other topics they want to add to the list? I don't have the list right in front of me. That's why I'm edging a little, but I thought that was a great summary of the things that we, as a group, thought we were going to review when we went through the process.
Absolutely. Oh, by the way, we will, they weren't here tonight, but I think somebody from the Housing Committee wanted to come, and also the chair of the Energy Committee. They missed. I didn't know they missed because it's the week I missed. But the chair of the Energy Committee, who's a great guy, would like to come and talk to us. So,
Robin, this is Deb McAdoo, and I am the substitute.
There you go, Deb McAdoo.
I'm the substitute, and the substitute went to the town instead of the village, so egg on my face, and that's why I showed up late, and I apologize. But it's been a very interesting conversation, and I appreciate your commitment to being good steward for housing.
Where do you live, Deb?
I live in the village.
Okay, that's even worse. Yeah, sorry.
Yes, it is.
Okay, great. So we will, Robin, we'll try to include those guests at our next meeting.
Absolutely. Yeah, I was expecting the Housing Committee tonight. I didn't know whether we'd want both the one night, but it seems to make sense.
In terms of the Housing Committee, I have had one meeting with the small grouping of, I guess, a working group. They're trying to put together suggestions and around inclusionary zoning. So just to kind of give you guys that heads up, we're trying to get together, I think, next week. So it's possible that by the next meeting, I might be able to share a little bit more of an update as to what they're looking to propose in terms of the town and village and inclusionary zoning.
Sounds good.
So, so are we looking at 2 weeks? Or are we looking at the first of next month? What are we
Schedule for
anticipating?
the first of next month, but if you want to do it in 2 weeks, why not? Right?
Well, are we going to be going over more chapters at the next meeting, or are we, what's the plan on that?
My work and schedule is based on the first meeting of every month. That's how I have it planned. That's not to say that I couldn't come if I could look at my calendar.
Well, why don't we stick to that until we get closer to our end date, and then maybe then we realize that we actually do need more meetings.
Okay, I'm okay. Yeah, I'm okay with that.
I can't make it on the 20th of this month, the next Thursday, but with enough heads up, if I get it into my calendar, I could add in the other Thursdays.
So let's say the first week of June. Okay.
Just one day, David, first Thursday.
So, so when are we having the guests? Do we want to have the guests the same time as we're discussing chapters with Regina, or do we want our guests at an alternative time? I mean,
Well,
we
if we put them on the agenda first and then work on a chapter, I don't know what would be next. It depends on the size of what we're tackling. Right?
yeah, okay. I'm just, I mean, we've just spent lovely, almost 2 hours with Regina, so.
If we're looking at, I don't know, Regina, what will be next chapter? Oh, obviously chapter 8.
Yeah, so it still would be a lot of this same thing that we talked about tonight, because I think there's a lot of text and decisions that still need to be made about what's happening, where the overlay is going, and what components of the overlay is happening in each of those areas.
Right.
Okay.
So let's just say that we definitely, we'll have those 2 guests, if it's possible, join us. And then if we can always put the chapter on the agenda. Sound fair? I mean, we did spend a lot of time talking about that one section tonight, which kind of extended things a little bit. So I think we can get it done.
I think maybe that's because it's a bigger change than some of the other things. The other things may just need tweaking, where this is actually a rethinking.
Yep. Agreed. So maybe we can, because chapter 8 is pretty small. So Regina, maybe we can go over that, the 2 guests, and have some more ideas around what we talked about tonight.
Yeah, that sounds good.
Okay.
A thought just occurred to me that I'd like to propose to all you guys, and I'll try and do it quickly. And I don't know if it's the next meeting or the meeting after, but something to kind of start to think about. And I don't even know, Robin, if you've heard at the town or village staff level through Evan, what plans might potentially be, or if the Board of Trustees have had conversations. But there is a lot of money that's about to be released through American Rescue Plan and different COVID relief acts that is going to be given to us as a municipality, whether it's the town of Essex or the village, I don't know.
It will go to the town initially.
Initially, and is there a plan to allow for the village to do project? I guess my question, or what I'm going for is, are there projects in mind and ways for that money to be spent, or should us as a planning commission potentially be looking at and prioritizing a couple things that we think might work well?
Well, we could give suggestions.
Beautification. Yeah.
The trustees will prioritize things.
Sure. Yeah. So I guess that's what
first
I'm
thing will
wondering.
be the train station.
Okay, I think that's great. I mean, mostly what I'd go for is to do some type of project transformative thing, or something that we could point to and say, this is what we did with our money, as opposed to try and spend it in 15, 20, 30 different places. But that's just my opinion. But I just wanted to kind of put that out there for the rest of the commission as well, to know that there's money coming in. I didn't know if it's worth us as a planning commission helping or advising or working with the trustees to try and think about some things we might want to do here within the village. So I'll leave it at that for now, and we'll see what ends up coming our way and asked of us, and as things roll out.
Patrick, the trustees always have the option of using the brain trust that they have in us to bounce things off and discuss stuff. It's their option to use our skills and what we know to the best of the village's behalf. And I think they know that. But I think if you've got some suggestions, you might run them by, and say, hey, by the way, these are things that I've heard through. I'm not sure if the route is to go through Robin.
Yeah,
or
just send them to Terry and myself.
Okay. And so that they might have that possibility that it's, something to look at. But it's what I understood from the Vermont Leagues of Cities and Towns, which I participated in earlier in the week, is that the money is supposed to come per capita here in Chittenden County. So that the town would probably receive it, but they would be distributing it out. And they will be getting not just the monies that go to cities and towns, but the county monies are also going to then be
Yes.
distributed because we have
We don't have county
we have a
government.
very lax or loose county government system. So you're right. There's going to be a dump truck load, and it's just going to. The roads may actually be paved with gold. Is that very old rumor?
And
Here.
yeah, and the other thought that I have around it is that every other town in the state, and not just our state, but every state across the country, is getting this too, in every municipality. If we're able to help the Board of Trustees potentially prioritize some projects and get some bids out there ahead of other towns, we might actually see our projects move forward faster than some other places. So, I mean, I know, like you said, Diane, that the Board of Trustees has, they can come ask us if they want, but what if we preemptively said, we think this might be a good way to spend some of the money based on what we're looking at, comprehensive plan, and how we think it fits into our town plan and village plan, and how it might work with Design 5 Corners. Just a thought, that's all.
I get Robin to share your thoughts because I think it's the way to go.
Okay.
Yeah,
Yeah,
I think so.
I'd like-
Just send me an email, I'll pass it on.
I'd like to see that Vermont, the UVM students design for that train station become a reality. I think that would be
There is
great.
going to be a meeting July 19th. John, I've hunted out a few boards from 5 years ago.
Yeah.
It'd be nice if you and I could meet up to see if I think there might be one or two missing. And then I'll throw them under the bus. I know Greg Morgan had them for a while, and I'm not sure they all made it back to the village offices, but if you and I could meet up, we could take a look to see if we need to supplement that.
Okay. Piece of cake.
New fire station would be good too. Just saying.
There's a somewhat narrow list on the infrastructure side of what it can be spent on.
All right, everyone. So if we don't have
Motion to
anything,
adjourn.
yeah, motion to adjourn accepted. Do I have a second?
I'll second, yeah.
Excellent. All in favor?
Aye.
All opposed? Everybody have a great night. Thank you
Thank
so
you very
much.
much.
Thank
Talk
you.
to you soon.